So today we're going to start a little bit different. Usually we start off by me talking and explaining certain things. In our first class, we went over sofrito and the building of foundation and the different variations of sofrito. We talked a little bit about the knives. In week two, we spoke about adobo and we built our adobo, and then we talked a little bit about cutting boards. Today, we're going to start off with making the rice just because it's a process. And so by the end of class, we'd like to have a product. I don't think the rice is really going to take that long, but I would really just like to get some of that started so that you guys can see the process. And there's a lot of questions around rice, and there's a lot of different ways that you can make rice. For example, I see you, Marie. For example, one of the things that in Puerto Rican culture that's almost like 50-50 is that some people start with the rice and they will cook the rice a little bit with a little bit of that oil, maybe some salt and maybe some garlic. Um, at one time, maybe some lard. But then there's the other people that will start with the liquid first, that will start with the water. So today we're going to start with the water first, or we'll start. I'll show you guys what I mean by that. But we're going to fill it up with the liquid first. Um, I like to think about rice as especially Puerto Rican rice, or the more popular rice of Puerto Rican culture, which is arroz con gandules. I like to think of it more like a one in all type of meal, all in one type of meal. So, you have the beans, so you have the proteins. In a lot of cases, there's the fat, but then there's also some meat. Sometimes there's meat in there, there's vegetables in there. And so there's a lot of things that you see similar to that, where it's kind of like an all-in-one pot. And sancocho is a good example of that, where you have all of those things all in one. Asopao is another example of an all-in-one. And one of the theories is that before the 50s, most people did not have four burners. People had one burner, maybe outside, maybe a fogón, right? Outside under some leña, under some wood. And so what would happen is that instead of doing four separate meals, you'd put it all in one because you only had one burner. So in this case, that's similar to what we're gonna do. We're gonna do one burner, and we're just gonna have it all together, and you're gonna see how it comes out. So we're gonna start with our rice first, and then we'll talk a little bit about grocery stores, which especially today is pretty interesting to talk about. But we'll do the rice first. So in this case, we are going to do, we're gonna do some meat. Now, you don't have to do meat in the beginning of your, you don't have to do meat in the beginning of your rice. You can actually just do, you could just do oil. In some cases, what I do whenever I'm doing vegetarian food is I'll roast peppers, and that smokiness and the roasting, and also like smoked foods like smoked paprika, or I'll even put the peppers on the burners to blacken them. That'll help a little bit with the smokiness and kind of enhancing flavors so that you don't miss meat so much. So I'm using this little pot here, and I'll put a little bit of oil there, but it doesn't need much oil because I have some cooking ham that I'm going to put in first, and that's going to be the first thing. That's going to release a lot of oils, and then that's going to start all the flavors. And then we're going to start putting in the ingredients of the sofrito that we did in week 1 or in our first class. That's going to be a little bit deconstructed, and I'll show you what I mean. Also, what I did, instead of like adding water, I've tried to be a little bit more conscious of like some of the waste of managing my waste a little bit more. So for example, like the ends of celery, the ends of like cilantro, even the peels from the onions, I put it in some water, and I've created a vegetable stock with it. Sounds weird, but it does work. So that's actually going to be, instead of just putting water in there, now I'll have a vegetable stock, and then I'll put that in there. And so now my rice is going to have even more flavor.
Oh, Roberto, do you cook it all? You cook that stock, or like you?
I did. So I put it in, I boiled it, I brought it to a boil, to a simmer, and just cooked it all down. And then if you look at it, it looks like the vegetable stock that you buy at the store. And then I'll try to use all this waste here for compost. Questions?
You have to wash the rice before you put it in there?
Oh man, I love that question. That's a great question. So I'm putting, the first thing I'm putting in there is the jamon, but you don't have to. I could also put like, I like putting like smoked turkey also in my food. That's another, especially if there's people that aren't into pork, and that's common. Then you can do smoked turkey also. I like that as an option. But in regards to the rice, so when I was young, I remember that we used to definitely wash the rice and go through the rice, because you would find like little pebbles and little stones in there. So today the rice is really processed really well, almost to the point where they've almost taken out all of the nutrients. So today it's really processed to the point where I have not seen any debris in my rice in a long time. Not like before, like we used to before. So I do not wash my rice before, because also I don't want to take out more nutrients out of it. So today I don't. Back in the day, definitely should. I hope that makes sense.
Just wanted to settle a debate, so that works. That's my
Yeah, no, man, that's an ongoing debate. Same thing with also chicken. Also, I mean, at one time you definitely should have, washed it down. And in a lot of the old recipes, people would always, what they would call, lime up chicken. They'd like wipe it down with a lime. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And so that would, in the Caribbean, that's often said, you're going to lime up the chicken because of the bacteria that the lime would kill, and maybe some of the funkiness that it has. Today we don't. If you have a trusted butcher, hopefully you don't go through the same things that you used to back then. So I think people are using those old techniques and still doing it today, when sometimes it's not as necessary. Sometimes you will get some funky fish, or you will get some funky chicken, or but it's definitely not what it used to be. So this is already smelling good, if you believe me. I don't know if you believe me, but this is already smelling pretty good.
I always feel like I can smell the cooking, even though I can't smell the cooking.
I swear. So the next thing that's gonna go in here is I'm gonna go in with some onions, and I've also diced up some peppers. So I'm going in with some onions, and the peppers that I'm using are the peppers that we used in sofrito. So I'll show you what I mean by that. these peppers that you would see them at the grocery stores. These would be the what you would call the Cubanelle peppers. It's what they look like on the inside. They're not spicy, but they're common in sofrito, even in Puerto Rico. So this would be like a pimiento grande or something like that, just a pimiento pepper. So it would be a sweet pepper. And then these ajicitos right here, or ají dulce, or in the British Islands, they call them the pimiento peppers. I also dice those up, and that's also going to go in this as a base to our rice.
Roberto, so you said you use that instead of the prepared sofrito?
So if I don't have prepared sofrito, which I often don't, I almost always do sofrito on the daily. So it just tastes better when I do it on the daily. But you can always just, you know, you can freeze it, or um, usually what I don't know if we talked about in our first week, what people would do, which is kind of ingenious, is that they would put some oil or maybe even some lard on it, and what happens is that fat, it shields the sofrito from any bacteria entering. And I'll show you an example of that. So this is pique, right? And so in the old school and still today, people always cap this off with some oil. And I thought that the reason why they did that was because it pours slower because there's oil there. But what it's there for is so that it preserves the hot sauce or the pique so that the bacteria don't enter and have it go bad. So before refrigeration, that was a very common practice. You would put some lard, you'd make some sofrito, and you didn't have a refrigerator. You'd keep it on the stove, and then you just put a spoonful in your pot, and you were ready to go. It was like an all-in-one, you know.
So is the pique, is the rest of the liquid just
It's vinegar based.
vinegar, which also
Yeah.
kills, right? That kills.
Yeah. So right. So Lord willing, I will have a hot sauce coming out soon. And so you have to make sure that the pH level is high enough. And so there's certain things that has that raises the pH level, because when you have a high pH level, that means that the shelf life is long. So at least 2 years. So vinegar does that, and so does tomatoes. Tomatoes will do that too. That'll really raise up your pH level. Just to give some color, I'm also going to go in with a little bit of red bell peppers. Since it's just me, that's why I'm using this little pot. It's not the biggest pot, but
So that pot, is that a steel, right?
it may be aluminum.
Aluminum or steel?
Yeah.
Do you put
It's
that in the
what
oven?
they call that's what they call the Dutch oven pots also, or the Dutchies. And that can go, and they're great for like an open fire. It's really like old school kind of pot. At this point, we talked about it. I love to add garlic. I don't usually put the garlic in the beginning of my cooking process, but I'm going to put in the garlic now.
Do you do it now because the garlic will burn, or?
Yeah, if you put the garlic in the beginning, then it may burn. Yeah. So here we have some adobo, and that adobo I want to put in there so that those vegetables get all that flavor. Put some salt in there too. And so this is just some salsa de tomate. This is actually just the canned stuff. My great grandmother, what she used to do is that she would boil a tomato and some garlic, and then she would fish it out, and then she would put it in a mortar and pestle and smash it up, and then that was her salsa de tomate that she would use. That's what
So the whole
Doña
tomato with the
Cruz.
skin on and everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the prettiest thing, but that's what she did. I don't think there was at that time there was really no waste. There was really no waste.
Right.
My one of the things that my mom would often tell me, because she was one of 10 and in a pretty poor household, is that they were vegetarians, but not because they wanted to be vegetarians, but because they really couldn't afford meat. So it was maybe once or twice a year that they would eat meat. So you see that often. That's a true story around the world.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the option. We eat probably meat and act really a little bit too much meat, but around the world, most people don't have access to meat like that. A surprise for like saltiness is you could also put olives. This is optional. You don't have to, but it'll give some flavor and some pop to the food. Some surprises of salt in there. And then also in this particular recipe, we're going to use black beans. So black beans are high in protein. Of the beans, it is one of the highest in protein and in nutrients. So we're going to use black beans today. So I'm going in there with some black beans. And so what I did also with the black beans is, instead of just using all the gunk in the can, and I did not, usually I do, I will use fresh beans, but today we didn't. So what I'll do is I'll clean them up. I'll take the gunk out instead of putting that in the food. This is somewhat what it looks like, and this is just the vegetables. This is without the rice. That's the meat and all the sofrito and all that stuff. And I'm gonna go in with some of this this caldo. And so it's hot, and so that way I don't stop the process of the cooking. If I went in there with some cold water, then you got to kind of start all over. So we have some, so we have it going here. One of the things that I did not include was usually some achote. I'll put some achote in there to give it some coloring so that my food will have some coloring, but it already looks red.
How much stock did you put in, Roberto?
I love that question.
Because I don't know how much you put in.
Almost always, or always whenever I'm doing rice, I will put the rice 1 inch under the water, under the liquid. So using this part of my finger, that's usually the measurement. So no matter what type of rice I'm using or what type of rice I'm making, it could be arroz con gandules or just any type of arroz or white rice, arroz con coco, whatever, it's always the same measurement. So the rice, when this comes to a nice, and it's already pretty hot, when I put the rice in it, it'll be almost always 1 inch under that liquid. So I don't want to fill up the pot too much, because then when I close it, it's really not going to cook. The vapors there's no space for the vapors to cook. So one of the biggest tricks also with cooking rice or cooking food in general is you should taste it. And okay, so what's it taste like? Does it need salt? And make those adjustments. So at this point, this is a good time where I could taste it and pretty much see where it's at.
I can tell from here it's going to taste good.
You think so?
I think so. So do you ever make your own, do you make beans from dry or ever?
Yeah, I usually do. Oh, it's nice. It's really good. Yeah, it's really flavorful.
I was right.
So it doesn't need much of anything. I do, and so what I'll do is I'll put it in a container. I'll slice an onion, maybe some ends of a pepper, and maybe some fresh garlic in there and some salt, and I'll leave it overnight. They'll swell up, and then in the morning I'll cook them on low, let them go throughout the day. Yeah, that's what you like to do that too, Michael?
No, I just started doing beans from dry recently. I mean, lentils, obviously.
Uh-huh. They cook a little faster, yeah.
Yeah, they cook fast.
Yeah.
Did you add more salt and something else?
I did. Little bit more salt, some of that adobo that we made last week.
So back on the rice question, or with the liquid, so do you average like a cup per cup? Couple of liquid to
No, it's just the visual. It's the visual of 1 inch under the water. Always 1 inch under the liquid, and it'll always work. Always. It'll always work. And there's folks in restaurants that do it like that too. It's just like they already know 1 inch under, like that line. Even if you have big hands, small hands, it works. I swear it works. So we're gonna go in with that today. We're gonna go in with that theory today. Mix it up a little bit. Make sure that all the grains get all of this flavoring. And this is packed with a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff.
How much rice are you putting in?
Until it gets 1 inch under the water.
Oh my God, okay.
Yeah, for real. So I am almost there. Yep. Yeah, we're good. So just so you see, so see the rice is around right there. That's where the rice is at. So it's about 1 inch. So just packed with all this stuff. We're gonna let it dry up a little bit. And then this is one of the biggest tricks for rice is you always have to make sure that it's sealed. You have to make sure that it's sealed so that the vapors cook the rice. If you let the vapors escape, the rice will never cook thoroughly. That's a big, so you put a top on that fits, but you have to cover it up double. So that means you have to get some aluminum foil and not just put it on there baggy, or so that the vapors escape. You have to put that on, and then usually you'll take a towel and you'll pat it down around the pot and make sure that everything is sealed really well, and then you put that lid on there, and that way then none of the vapors will escape.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
And is that especially true? Because like when you make just rice and water, is it different, or do you always do that?
Yeah, I always do it.
I'm gonna try it.
Your rice will never be the same, Michael.
Roberto, what kind of consistency are we looking for in the rice?
Nice and when it's done?
Yeah.
Oh, nice and fluffy. Yeah, nice and fluffy. Yeah. So you see now that it's starting to dry up. Soon I'll cover it up. I'm gonna cover it. I'll double it up. I got really ambitious today, so I wanna. This is the first aluminum foil that people would use at one time, and so I was thinking about just using, instead of using aluminum foils, actually using the hoja de plátano, and it'll work. Using the banana leaf. So, all right, I'm going to cover this up.
Nice.
So in order for this to bend, the banana leaf to bend and for it to be flexible, and it should bend up a little bit more as it's cooking, but in order for that to happen, you have to kind of put it over the fire, and that way it gets soft before you start using it, because when it's fresh, it's really actually pretty stiff. So like if you ever, that's the banana leaf.
Yeah.
We put the banana leaf. So if you're ever making like pasteles,
Yeah.
you always have to have it go over some fire, or so that it bends. So it then gets flexible.
What temperature do you have it at now?
So it's pretty, I've lowered it.
Okay.
I've lowered it so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. So I want to make sure that it's sealed up really nice.
So you don't let it dry out completely, you leave some water still in there?
Yeah, I did. There's water in there because the vapors are gonna cook it for sure. It's definitely gonna cook up well. And so when I then open it up, I'm not just gonna go in there and kind of like mix it up like that. I'll gently, and you'll see the technique is that I'll put it in and then I'll twist the spoon, and I'll put it in and I'll twist the spoon just so that the vapors can come out. And you'll see that in a little while. But we just have to let this go for a little bit, and we could talk about the other stuff now, but I wanted to work on that first before we went on with the other things. Any questions about the rice?
Now, when this gets cooked, will it have that rasca or the pegao at the bottom?
It will if I leave it alone, and I don't go all the way down. I can. You can kind of like leave it alone, leave the bottom part alone, and you could create that. But I'm going to go down all the way and twist it, so that way I'm kind of gonna interrupt that process.
Do you like pegao?
Yeah, sure. You don't, Javier?
No. Every time I hear people say how good it is, I'm like,
I mean, I don't use it.
Rice.
I don't really use it for anything, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't use it much, but yeah.
Is there a use for it? Like, because I always remember like some people liked it and they would eat it all, like even if it was burned. But is there uses for it after, like for another meal? Like, is that a thing people do?
I've seen some people ball up the pegao and use it that way. I've seen people eat it with like fried eggs. Yeah, fried
Sounds
eggs and everything will work.
What is it that you guys are referring to?
To the pegao on the bottom.
the burnt rice in the bottom of the pan.
Like when it sticks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was never
It's kind
taught.
of like the fried rice of it.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you do with it in the Philippines? Do you know, Marie?
You don't get it that way. It would be bad if
It
that
would be a
happened.
bad thing.
All of the rice is supposed to be really fluffy, and all of it's supposed to be like perfect. So if that's
I see.
happened, that means that you had it too
Yeah.
high, or yeah. That's why
Okay.
the rice cooker is like the go-to. But I don't
I
own a
see.
rice cooker. I like to cook it like this.
Okay. Awesome.
I think
Yeah.
I think Cubans call it rasca.
Rasca, and Dominicans call it concon. So yeah, that's right.
Con con.
So
Now I have another term.
concon, yeah,
Con con.
concon, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about grocery stores, especially and so the process of grocery stores. So when I was learning about how to shop, I was always taught that whenever you go into a store is that you want to stay along the edges of the store. If you notice that along the edges of the store is usually where a lot of the fresher produce are. So there you'll get, usually on your right, usually when you go in, you'll always see the fruits and the vegetables, almost always, right? No matter where. That's the first thing that you're going to usually bump into. I think that has to do with expirations. And so like, that's something that they do want you to buy. Also, it's great on the eyes. They want to present that they have abundance of it. You see that what they do at grocery stores is they stack stuff up to show their abundance, and how much they have. And so yeah, you'll usually see that. Also, you'll see the fresh bread on along the edges. You'll see like the meats and the fish. But then also you do see some things like packaged meats, things like salami and those kind of things, and the Lunchables and stuff like that. Things that aren't necessarily so healthy. So basically, what I would say is that yes, um, eating along the edges of the store, that is great, because in the middle there is a lot of that processed food, but also create a list. About 65% of folks that go to the store actually create lists, and they're just sticking to it. In the United States, about 25% of us, um, about on average, 25% of our food or our groceries is processed food or sugars. So minimize that a little bit more. Also, one of the curious things about the grocery store is that, and when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because the carts aren't always cleaned so thoroughly. And what happens is that bacteria form in there as you put meats. There's like chicken juice that like pours out. And so some studies have shown that up to, in some grocery stores, up to 50% of the carts will have things like E. coli and very bad bacteria that have built there because of the things that are going inside the carts, and they're not cleaning the carts thoroughly. Now about, I think, um, at one time there was, I think last year was 3 to 4% of the people that were shopping were doing shopping online, but now I'm sure that that has really gone up a lot. In especially with what's going on today. The best days to shop when it comes to the grocery stores, uh, Mondays and Tuesdays, the grocery stores are less packed. If you go on the weekends, you're gonna average about 7 minutes more at the grocery store. The worst time to shop is actually when most people are hungry, which is from 4 to 5 o'clock. And that's when you're not only going and you're very impulsive and you're going to buy a lot of things that sometimes you don't need. So you're spending more, and then you're not necessarily buying those things that should be on your list. So those are just some interesting facts about the grocery stores and shopping, and just sticking to the things that are on your list that you need, and not buying impulsive things like those things that they put at the lines, at the grocery store lines, to kind of bait you into buying. Let me see some of the other notes that I had. I had some other notes here. One of the interesting things that they do is cereal boxes. You see that cereal boxes will all be the same, but they're not the same weight. So the box looks the same, but the weight is not the same. And so that's a way that sometimes, they kind of get you and charge you as much, but there's not as much cereal in there. They do the same thing with some of the bottling that they do. I know they do that with jellies, where they have like these interesting angles that they take to kind of have less in there to sell. Also, the way they package bread, for some reason, if you notice, a lot of bread is, even if it's mass produced, they'll put it in brown bags. And so for some reason in our psyche, we feel that must mean that it's fresh bread. And so we're more likely to buy it. It's just really interesting stuff that, along the way, that I've kind of information that we've gathered. So it's starting to smell really good in here. I'm going to check on that rice again. I'll take you guys with me, and then we can check it out to see where the rice is.
I remember that thing about trying to not go to the store when you're hungry, because it's the worst. It's so hard.
I feel like
it's
our parents told us that too.
Yeah.
So it's wet up here because it's actually gathering some of the vapors, and you can see that.
That's good, Marie.
So if I open it, if you see, the vapors should escape, and that's exactly what happened.
Mine is definitely not done. has a little ways to go.
So you see that the process where it's at right now. I'm going to mix it, and I'll show you how I mix it. So usually it'll be like this. And then what my family would do is they'd put, make a nice little hill here, organize it really nice. But my rice, believe it or not, is almost done. You could see it there.
Wow.
Can you see? Yeah, it's almost done, actually. So I'm gonna cover it up a little bit more, and in about 5 to 10 minutes, it'll be done, believe it or not. And I feel like that's a pretty fast process. But one of the tricks, again, is you can't let any of those vapors escape. You wanna make sure that so you want a lid that really seals on there really well. And you wanna maybe cover it up with aluminum foil really well. And then pat it down with a towel so that it really seals up really well.
Marie, are you cooking this while you're watching?
I am. I'm also making banana bread.
I love that.
Dinner and dessert.
So I have a class. I have an adult class on Wednesday where everybody cooks, and we cook the same thing. Really similar to what we're trying to do with the students, but everybody cooks.
Does anyone ever have an emergency while they're cooking and they don't know what to do? Like they put too much of something?
We did jerk chicken, and there were some people that like, oh yeah, I can't eat this. It's too hot. So, we then have to dilute it. So we'll create like some gravy or some of the chicken gravy, and we'll put it in there. And so that helps.
But I had a question really quick. So
Yeah, of course.
he's, he wanted to know what a vapor was, but then he got shy and he left.
Yeah. The vapors is that air that's trapped in there. That's what's actually helping cook this rice. Is those vapors. We don't want them to escape. We want to keep them in there so that it continues cooking our rice.
I don't know.
Yeah. But all of these recipes, we've been sharing it on our page. And sharing it for people to cook, hopefully.
Are there any traps that people fall into when making rice like this, or rice, even rice in general, that are kind of like the be aware or you may run into type of things?
The whole part about not covering it up enough, I think that's a real big one, is like really sealing it, making sure that it seals. Another thing is, and it's a kind of something that whenever anything's at a boil, usually when you cover it, you lower the heat. So not keeping the heat up too high so that it burns. So now that we had it at a boil, we want to keep it at a boil, but we don't want to burn it. So definitely lowering it so that you don't burn the bottom. So that's another thing that maybe we do. Another thing is not filling it up too much with too much rice, because if there's no space in there, then the vapors can't cook the rice because there's no space. So you have to leave a little bit of space, and that's one thing. And that's with a lot of things. For example, a common thing that we often do, because we want to cook a lot in a little bit of time, is that like for example, if you're baking stuff and you just cram up your pan, but you can't cram up your pan because, or one of the reasons why you shouldn't is because then the air cannot travel around the food to cook it thoroughly. So if it's all crammed up together, then it's not going to cook evenly. So that's one thing that we often do, is just like we either cram it up too much, or same thing with the pot, is we don't want to cram it up too much. You have to leave a little bit of space so that the heat travels between it so that it cooks. So same thing if you're doing a pot of sancocho. If it's too crammed with too much vegetables in there, then it's not gonna cook thoroughly. You have to give it some space. So that's another thing that we do, is we cram up our pots a little bit too much, or cram up our pans a little bit too much. And that's one thing that we do that sometimes can can ruin our meal.
It looks like Darina mentioned the ratio of water to rice being wrong, right? Which you also mentioned. But it sounds like she likes to cook a lot.
I like that.
Sounds like she's got skills.
Is there any way to save rice that may not taste that flavorful once you open it? So like, you put all your ingredients at the beginning.
Ooh.
And then so I guess the question is there a way to save rice? So like if it comes out where it's too hard, right? Or if maybe you find out that you just didn't put enough seasoning, is there any way to fix it?
Yes, there is. So let's say that it didn't have enough salt, right? Well, one of the things that we have to do that I had mentioned before is we have to taste along the way to make sure that it's okay, and then make those adjustments along the way. But let's say you're in a hurry and you forget that process. So one of the things that I do is I'll boil a little bit of water or maybe some stock, and then I'll put the salt inside that stock a little bit, but not a lot, and then I'll mix that in that rice. So that's a way that I could save it as far as the flavors go. So
Marina mentions like making fried rice the next day, like
yes,
Asian
yes,
style.
yes, yep. Like for stir fries, that's like leftover rice is the best. Is what actually most stir fries use is that old rice, like old white rice. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's usually used for those stir fries. How's it going over there, Marie?
I think it's good. I think I would have helped is if I had like chopped everything up beforehand, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for me. But
Yeah,
I like that you can put whatever you want in it for vegetables.
yeah, that's right. So the vapors are now escaping. That's a good sign. That means that it was cooking thoroughly. And it's already nice and fluffy actually.
Okay, I can't see Marie. Put it back. Put the camera back. Nice.
We garnish it with a little bit of cilantro.
I wish I had my red pepper. I think that's what it needs.
The color of a red pepper really enhances it too.
Yeah.
Right?
It really makes it pop, right? So there's our pot of rice. And so you can use pretty much any type of bean you want. Whatever your favorite type of bean is. And there it is.